my family manipulated me into buying them a $180K house with my life savings. They let my sister live there rent-free while I paid $1,200 monthly. But when I demanded she contribute, I stopped paying completely and let the bank foreclose. Now, I left them homeless. I'm 28 years old, work in tech, and honestly, I need to tell this story because what my parents did to me basically destroyed me financially and emotionally for years. And I'm only now starting to process everything. The thing is, I was always the responsible kid, the one who got good grades, the one who helped around the house, the one who never caused problems. And I guess that ended up being my downfall because my parents assumed I would always be there to rescue them, no matter what. My sister Nicole, who's 3 years younger than me, was the complete opposite. She dropped out of high school in her senior year, never held a job for more than 2 months, and basically lived off my parents like she was entitled to it. And the worst part is they let her, like they enabled her in everything while they demanded more and more from me. It all started like 6 years ago, when I finished high school and wanted to go to college. My dad, David, told me there was no money for that if I wanted to study, I had to figure it out myself. He worked in construction, but his job history was super unstable. I mean, he changed jobs every year or so. Sometimes he'd be months without anything. My mom, Barbara, worked part-time at a department store. We weren't swimming in money, but we weren't on the streets either, you know what I mean? The thing is, I ended up going to a tech school for programming, paying for it with student loans and working part-time at a Starbucks. I graduated at 22, got a decent job in tech, and started earning, well, not a fortune, but like $65,000 a year, which for someone fresh out of tech school was pretty good. That's when the requests started. First it was like, "Hey Andrew, can you help us with rent this month? Your dad had some unexpected expenses." Then it was, "We need you to help us with the car, with doctor bills, with this and that." And I did it because, well, they're my parents, right? And besides, they constantly reminded me that they had raised me, that they had given me a roof, that they had fed me my whole life. My mom Barbara was an expert at making me feel guilty, like she'd say things like, "We sacrificed everything for you guys, and now that we might need a little help, you're going to turn your back on us?" And I fell for it every time. I'd send them money, pay their bills. I felt like the worst son in the world if I doubted even for a second. Meanwhile, Nicole kept living with them without paying anything, without working, basically being an eternal teenager at 22, 23 years old. When I asked my mom why Nicole wasn't looking for work, or why they didn't ask her to contribute, she always had an excuse. That Nicole was going through a difficult time, that she was finding her path, that not all of us have the same capabilities as you, Andrew. As if I were a robot without feelings or something. And my dad was the same, always defending her, saying she needed more support because she was more sensitive, more vulnerable. I didn't understand what was vulnerable about a perfectly healthy 2-3-year-old person who simply didn't want to work. I lived in a shared apartment with 2 roommates, in a kind of ugly place, honestly, because between paying my student loans, helping my parents, and covering my basic expenses, I didn't have much left. I had like $28,000 saved after 4 years working, which honestly was my entire safety net, everything I had managed to save being super careful with every penny. And then came the conversation. My parents invited me to dinner at their house, which was already weird because normally I visited them without so much protocol, and when I arrived they sit me down at the table like it was a business meeting or something. My dad starts with the speech about how they're getting older, that rent is getting more expensive, that they need stability in their lives after so many years of sacrifice. And my mom says, "We've been thinking it would be good to have our own house, our own place where we can live peacefully, without worrying about the landlord raising the rent or kicking us out." It all sounded reasonable until they said, "And you could help us with the down payment." I was like, "How much are you thinking?" And my dad says, "Well, we saw some nice little houses in the suburbs, like $180,000. We'd need about $30,000 for the down payment and closing costs." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. They were literally asking me for all my savings, everything I had managed to save over years of work. I tried to say no, that it was too much, that I also had plans for my life, that I wanted to eventually buy something for myself. But then the emotional show started. My mom started crying, saying that after everything they had done for me, this was the least I could do, that they had given me life, that they had supported me until I was 18. My dad, with that serious voice he used when he wanted to intimidate me, saying that family supports each other, that he had worked until his back broke to give us a roof, that now it was my turn to give back. And I fell for it. Obviously, I fell for it. They made me feel so guilty that I ended up agreeing, thinking that, well, at least my parents would have a safe place to live, that this was an investment in their well-being. Plus, my dad said something that convinced me at the time. He said we could put the house in my name. That way I'd be building equity, that technically it was my investment. It sounded good in theory, right? So I used my $28,000 for the down payment and closing costs, took out a mortgage of $155,000 in my name, and bought a house for my parents in a decent suburban area. Nothing fancy but nice. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, small yard. The monthly payment was like $1,200 between mortgage, taxes, and insurance. My parents committed to giving me $800 monthly to help. I would cover the remaining $400. It wasn't ideal, but I thought I could manage it. They moved in super happy, filled the house with their stuff, and for the first few months, everything seemed to work fine. I stayed in my shared apartment because obviously I couldn't afford my own place after having emptied my savings, but well, I told myself that at least I was helping my family. Then Nicole started showing up more often at the house. At first it was like, I'm going to stay the weekend with mom and dad. Then it was, I'm going to stay all week. 3 months in, she basically already lived there, occupying one of the bedrooms like it was hers. When I asked my mom what was up with that, she told me Nicole was going through a difficult time, that she had broken up with her boyfriend, that she needed family support. I asked her if Nicole was paying anything for being there, and she said no, that how could she charge her own daughter? And I'm like, and what am I? But I didn't say anything because I already knew how they were going to react. 6 months after buying the house, something happened that still makes me angry when I think about it. I went to visit my parents one Saturday afternoon, like I used to do, and when I arrive, the house is half empty. Like, the main couch was missing, the big TV was missing, a bunch of stuff was gone. I ask what happened, and my mom very casually tells me, "Oh yeah, we moved." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" She explains that they found an apartment they liked better in another area, that they already moved there last week, that Nicole is going to stay in the house. They hadn't told me anything. 0 consultation, 0 notice. They simply made the decision and that was it. I started complaining, like how is it possible that they didn't tell me anything if the house is in my name, if I'm paying for it? My dad tells me, well, Nicole needs a place to live, that she can't be paying rent in her situation, and that the house is big enough for her. I tell him, okay, but then Nicole has to start paying something. She has to contribute to the mortgage. My mom looks at me like I'd said the worst atrocity in the world and says, Andrew, your sister is looking for work. You can't be so cruel to demand money she doesn't have. And I'm thinking, she's been looking for work for like 5 years. When is she going to find one? So my parents go live in a rented apartment in another part of the city. Nicole stays in my house, living rent-free like it's a hotel, and I keep paying the full $1,200 monthly because my parents suddenly decided they couldn't help with the $800 they had promised. When I complained about that, my dad says, well, now they have to pay rent for their new place, that they can't be paying for 2 homes. And I'm like, and I can? I can be paying for a house where I don't live and an apartment where I do live? It went on like that for about 8 months. Me bleeding out financially, living super tight, unable to save a single penny, while Nicole lived in a 3-bedroom house by herself, without working, without contributing absolutely anything. Every time I tried to talk to my parents about this, they made me feel like the villain, that how could I be so selfish, that family supports each other in difficult times, that I had a good job and could afford it. My mom even told me once, you should be proud to be able to help your sister. Not everyone has that capacity. One day I was reviewing my bank statements because I was trying to make a budget, and I noticed something weird. There were some additional automatic withdrawals from my account that I didn't remember authorizing. I investigated, and it turns out my parents had set up a monthly automatic withdrawal of $500 additional, apart from the 1,200 for the mortgage. When I confronted them, my dad very calmly tells me, "Oh yeah, that's to help us with the rent for our new place," that I had told them they could do that. I never told them that. They were basically stealing $500 a month from me for almost half a year. I got furious, like angrier than I'd been in my life. I told them to cancel that withdrawal immediately, that it was enough, that I wasn't their personal bank. My mom starts with the crying again, saying, what kind of son was I? That how was I going to leave them without support? I told them that they had promised to help with the house, that Nicole wasn't contributing anything, that they had basically manipulated me into buying a house I wasn't even using, and that on top of that, they were taking extra money without permission. My dad got aggressive, told me that everything I had was thanks to them, that they had paid for my tech school, which was totally false because I paid for it with loans. But that's how they like to remember the story. That was my breaking point. I got to my apartment, sat in my room that I shared with the dining area because the place was so small, and thought, what am I doing with my life? I'm 27, almost 28. I work in tech earning decently, and I live like a college student while supporting my adult sister who does nothing. I made a decision I probably should have made much earlier. I called my parents and told them, you have two options. Nicole starts paying half the mortgage. That's $600 monthly. Or you sell the house and give me back my down payment money. The drama that ensued was epic. My mom screaming that how could I put them in that position. My dad saying I was ungrateful. Nicole sending me text messages saying I was a horrible brother. I gave them a month to decide. Nicole supposedly got a job at a coffee shop, started giving me $200 monthly, which obviously wasn't even close to the $600 I had asked for. But my parents begged me to accept that while she stabilized. I accepted for 2 more months. But after that, Nicole quit the coffee shop job because, according to her, the manager was too demanding, and went back to giving me zero. That's when I made the most radical decision of my life. I simply stopped paying the mortgage. Completely. Not one more peso. I blocked my parents from my bank account, changed my passwords, and stopped answering their calls and messages. I knew what was going to happen. I knew the bank would eventually foreclose on the mortgage. And honestly, I didn't care anymore. I had lost my down payment anyway. My credit was already half damaged from being so tight financially, and I thought, let it all rot. I can't do this anymore. For 3 months, I didn't pay anything. My parents bombarded me with messages, some begging, others threatening, others doing extreme guilt tripping. My mom sent me a message saying that if the house was lost, it was going to be my fault, that Nicole was going to end up on the street, that how was I going to be able to live with that? And for the first time in my life, I simply didn't care. I was so burned out, so emotionally exhausted, that their manipulation didn't work on me anymore. The bank sent the Rotende first foreclosure notices after the 3rd month of not paying. Nicole kept living there like nothing was happening. My parents tried to negotiate with the bank, but obviously they didn't qualify for anything because they didn't have stable income or credit history. The process took like 6 more months, with a bunch of legal paperwork and hearings. Finally, the bank executed the foreclosure and put the house up for auction. It sold for less than what we owed. Obviously, as usually happens in these cases, I think for about $140,000. Nicole had to move out. Finally. She went to live with a friend, paying shared rent like a normal adult person. My parents had to move to a cheaper apartment because they couldn't afford the one they had been renting anymore. Everything fell apart for them, and honestly, a part of me felt satisfied seeing that. I know it sounds horrible, but after years of feeling used and manipulated, seeing them face real consequences was almost liberating. My family basically stopped talking to me. My mom sent me one last long message telling me I had destroyed the family, that Nicole was suffering because of me, that they were never going to forgive me. My dad simply blocked me from everything. Nicole sent me like 20 messages, insulting me, calling me selfish, saying she hoped I'd be alone my whole life. And you know what? I blocked them all and moved on with my life. My credit obviously was left destroyed by the foreclosure. I'm not going to deny that. But I no longer had the burden of paying $1,200 $200 monthly for a house I wasn't using. I was finally able to move into my own apartment. Nothing fancy, a one-bedroom studio, but mine, without roommates, without having to share a bathroom or kitchen. I started rebuilding my savings. I stopped sending money to anyone. I learned to say no without feeling guilty. Now I'm 28. I live in my own space. I'm saving again. And I have no contact with my family. Sometimes I feel guilty. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I think, was I too harsh? Should I have tried something else? But then I remember all those years feeling miserable, living below my means to support people who didn't even appreciate my sacrifice, and I know I made the right decision. I lost the down payment money. I lost my family. But I gained my peace of mind and my independence. And that, honestly, is priceless.